The clock on the laboratory wall showed 11:47 p.m. when Dr. Kim Tae-ho rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the complex equations covering the whiteboard. Numbers and symbols filled every inch of the white surface like a maze of scientific mysteries. He had been working for 16 straight hours trying to solve the puzzle of quantum time mechanics. Dr. Park So-min sat at her computer desk across the room. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard as she entered new calculations into the computer program. The blue light from her screen made her face glow in the dark laboratory. She stopped typing and turned to look at Tae-ho. "We have been working on this problem for 3 years now," So-min said with a heavy sigh. "Maybe time travel is just impossible. Maybe we are chasing something that does not exist." Tae-ho walked over to the large machine in the center of the room. The particle accelerator looked like a giant metal ring with hundreds of wires and cables connected to it. Red and green lights blinked on and off around its surface. This machine was their life's work. They had built it piece by piece over the last 5 years. "Time is not impossible to understand," Tae-ho replied. "We just need to look at it differently. What if time is not a river flowing in one direction? What if it is more like an ocean where we can move in any direction we want?" Lee Dong-woo looked up from his notebook in the corner of the room. He was their graduate student and had been recording every experiment they performed. His job was to watch and write down everything that happened during their tests. "Dr. Kim, the energy readings from yesterday's test were very strange," Dong-woo said. "The quantum field showed patterns that I have never seen before. It was like the particles were trying to communicate with us." So-min walked over to join them near the machine. She carried a white coffee cup in her hands. The coffee was still hot and steam rose from the surface. She placed the cup on a small table next to the control panel. "Let's try one more test tonight," Tae-ho said. "But this time we will increase the power by 20%. Maybe we need more energy to see what is really happening." So-min looked worried. 20% more power could be dangerous. "We do not know what will happen if we push the machine too hard. Science requires risk," Tae-ho answered. "If we never take chances, we will never discover anything new." Dong-woo started the recording equipment. 3 cameras pointed at different angles around the particle accelerator. The computers began collecting data from dozens of sensors attached to the machine. Tae-ho pressed the startup button. The particle accelerator began to hum with electrical energy. The sound grew louder and louder as more power flowed through the system. The lights in the laboratory flickered as the machine drew enormous amounts of electricity. "Power level at 50%, So-min called out as she watched the control screen. "Quantum field is stable," Dong-woo reported from his monitoring station. "Power level at 70%, So-min announced. The humming sound became a deep roar. The metal ring began to vibrate. Small objects on nearby tables started to shake from the vibrations. "Power level at 90%, So-min said. Her voice showed concern. Suddenly the machine made a loud crackling sound like lightning. Bright blue sparks jumped between the metal connections. The lights in the room went completely dark for 2 seconds. "Emergency shutdown," So-min shouted as she reached for the red stop button. But before she could press it, something incredible happened. So-min accidentally knocked over her coffee cup with her elbow. The white cup fell toward the floor. Hot. Coffee splashed out in all directions. Then time seemed to freeze. The coffee cup stopped falling. The hot liquid hung in the air like brown droplets of glass. Everyone in the room stopped moving. Even the sparks from the machine hung motionless in the air. Then something even more amazing happened. The coffee droplets began to move backward. They flowed back together and up into the air. The coffee cup rose from where it had been falling and returned to the table. The hot liquid poured itself back into the cup as if someone was playing a movie in reverse. The coffee cup sat on the table exactly where So-min had placed it before. The coffee was still hot. Steam still rose from the surface. Everything was exactly as it had been 3 seconds earlier. "Did anyone else see that?" Tae-ho whispered. "The coffee cup," So-min said in amazement. "It went backward in time." Dong-woo stared at his recording equipment. All 3 cameras caught it. The timestamp shows the coffee cup moved backward for exactly 3.7 seconds. The particle accelerator powered down automatically. The roaring sound faded to a quiet hum and then to silence. The normal laboratory lights came back on. Tae-ho walked slowly over to the coffee cup. He touched it carefully with one finger. The cup was real. The coffee was real. But what they had just witnessed seemed impossible. "Run the video again," So-min said to Dong-woo. They gathered around the computer screen and watched the recording. The video clearly showed the coffee cup falling, then stopping, then moving backward through the air until it returned to its original position on the table. "Look at the quantum field readings during those 3.7 seconds, Tae-ho said as he pointed to the data on another screen. The energy patterns were unlike anything they had ever seen. Instead of the normal wave patterns, the data showed spirals and loops that seemed to fold back on themselves. It's like the quantum field created a bubble around that area," So-min observed. Inside the bubble, time flowed backward, while outside, the bubble time continued normally. Dong-woo printed out the data sheets and spread them across a table. "These mathematical patterns are not random. Look at how the numbers repeat in sequences. It's almost like someone programmed these patterns into the quantum field itself." Tae-ho felt his heart beating fast with excitement. "We did not just create a time machine. We discovered that time manipulation is already built into the fabric of reality. These patterns suggest that someone or something has been using time manipulation before." So-min pulled up historical data on her computer. "If these energy signatures are real, we should be able to find similar patterns in old scientific records." She searched through years of earthquake data, electromagnetic, field measurements, and cosmic radiation records. After 2 hours of searching, she found what they were looking for. "Here," she said, pointing to the screen. "These same energy patterns appear in geological data from 1592, 1743, 1888, and dozens of other dates going back over 1,000 years. That means time manipulation has been happening throughout human history," Tae-ho realized. "We are not the first people to discover this ability." The three scientists looked at each other in wonder and fear. They had started the night trying to understand time. Now they realized that time was far more mysterious and dangerous than they had ever imagined. Their discovery would change everything. But they did not yet know that others were already watching them, and that their simple experiment had set in motion events that would threaten the very fabric of reality itself. 3 days had passed since the coffee cup incident. Tae-ho could not sleep or eat properly. His mind kept thinking about the strange energy patterns they had discovered. The mathematical sequences appeared in his dreams like mysterious messages from another world. So-min had spent every waking hour searching through historical records. Her computer screen showed hundreds of documents from libraries around the world. Ancient texts, old scientific papers, and historical reports all contained similar energy signatures. "I found something important," So-min announced as Tae-ho and Dong-woo entered the laboratory that morning. "These temporal anomalies appear most frequently in Korea, especially around Jeju Island." She pointed to a map on her screen. Red dots marked locations where the strange energy patterns had been detected over the past 1,000 years. Most of the dots clustered around the southern Korean island. "Why Jeju Island?" Tae-ho asked. "What makes that place special?" "I called my friend Dr. Choi Ji-woo yesterday," So-min replied. "She teaches ancient Korean languages at the university. She agreed to help us translate some old documents I found." Dr. Choi Ji-woo arrived at their laboratory 1 hour later. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She carried a leather bag filled with old books and papers. Her specialty was reading ancient Korean texts that most people could no longer understand. "So-min told me about your strange discovery," Ji-woo said as she sat down at their conference table. "I brought some documents that might interest you. These texts are over 800 years old." She opened one of her books to a page covered with ancient Korean writing. The symbols looked like art rather than words. Ji-woo began to read the text aloud, then translated it into modern Korean. "This text speaks of people called the Saigons," Ji-woo explained. "The word Saigon means time in Old Korean. According to this document, the Saigons could bend time like other people bend metal." Dong-woo leaned forward with interest. "What else does it say about these Saigons?" They were not ordinary people. Jiwoo continued reading. The text says they could make wounded soldiers heal instantly by reversing their injuries. They could make crops grow backward into seeds, then forward again into full plants. They could even make old people become young again. Taeho felt excitement building in his chest. Where did these Saigons live? The text mentions several locations, Jiwoo replied, but it says their main temple was built in the sacred caves of Jeju Island. The caves were chosen because the island itself had special power over time. So-min pulled up geological surveys of Jeju Island on her computer. Look at this. Jeju Island has unusual electromagnetic properties. The rock formations contain high levels of rare minerals that could amplify quantum fields. There is more, Jiwoo said as she turned to another page. This document describes a great war between the Saigons and people who wanted to steal their power. The war lasted for 50 years. In the end, the Saigons decided to hide their knowledge to prevent it from being misused. She showed them a drawing in the ancient book. The picture showed men and women placing strange objects inside cave walls. The objects looked like crystals that glowed with inner light. The text says the Saigons scattered their time-bending tools throughout Korea, Jiwoo translated. They hid the most powerful artifacts in the Jeju caves. Then they made themselves disappear from history to protect their secrets. Dongwoo studied the ancient drawing carefully. These crystal objects look similar to the energy patterns we recorded in our experiment. What if our particle accelerator accidentally connected with one of these hidden artifacts? Taeho stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He began drawing connections between their discovery and the ancient texts. If the Saigons really existed, then time manipulation is not a new discovery. We just rediscovered something that was hidden centuries ago. We need to go to Jeju Island, So-min said firmly. If there are artifacts there that can help us understand time manipulation, we have to find them. Jiwoo looked worried. The ancient texts also contain warnings. The Saigons wrote that time manipulation was dangerous. They said that people who tried to control time often became slaves to it instead. What does that mean? Taeho asked. I am not sure, Jiwoo admitted. But the texts mention something called the temporal cascade. It sounds like a disaster. That could happen if too many changes are made to the timeline. The four scientists decided to travel to Jeju Island the next day. Jiwoo knew an archaeologist there who might be able to help them find the ancient caves. They flew to Jeju Island early the next morning. The island was beautiful with green mountains and black volcanic rock. Tourist beaches lined the coast, but the interior of the island remained wild and mysterious. Dr. Yoon Hae-jin met them at the airport. She was a local archaeologist who had been studying Jeju Island's history for 20 years. Her grandmother had been born on the island and knew many old stories about the caves. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the time guardians, Hae-jin explained as they drove toward the mountains. She said they protected the world from people who would abuse the power of time. The guardians hid magical objects in caves throughout the island. Did your grandmother ever see these caves? So-min asked. She claimed she did, Hae-jin replied. But she never told anyone exactly where they were located. She said the caves would reveal themselves only to people who needed to find them for the right reasons. They drove deep into the mountainous center of the island. The roads became narrow and winding. Ancient volcanic rock formations rose from the ground like natural sculptures. Hae-jin stopped the vehicle near a forest of twisted trees. The caves are somewhere in this area, she said. But there are hundreds of caves on this island. Finding the right ones could take weeks. Taeho pulled out the portable quantum field detector they had brought from their laboratory. The device was small enough to carry but sensitive enough to detect the same energy patterns they had found in their experiment. As soon as he turned on the device, it began beeping rapidly. The energy readings were stronger than anything they had recorded in their laboratory. The signal is coming from that direction, Taeho said, pointing toward a cluster of large rocks. They followed the signal through the forest. The device beeped faster and faster as they walked. After 20 minutes of hiking, they found an opening between two massive stones. The cave entrance was hidden behind thick vines and bushes. It looked like no human had entered for many years. but the quantum field detector was beeping so rapidly that the sounds almost merged into one continuous tone. "This is it," So-min whispered. "The source of the temporal energy." They pushed aside the vines and stepped into the cave. Their flashlights revealed smooth walls covered with the same ancient symbols Jiwoo had shown them in the old books. But the most amazing sight was deeper in the cave. Hundreds of crystal formations grew from the walls and ceiling. Each crystal glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "These crystals are not natural," Heijin observed. "Someone placed them here deliberately." Dongwoo held up his recording equipment. "The quantum field in here is incredibly strong. These crystals are amplifying temporal energy by a factor of thousands." As they explored deeper into the cave, they found stone tablets covered with ancient writing. Jiwoo began translating the symbols immediately. "This tablet talks about the nature of time itself," she said with wonder in her voice. "It says that time is both real and illusion. Time exists, but our understanding of it is limited by our human perspective." The next tablet contained a warning. It says that people who try to control time will eventually lose their ability to experience the present moment. They become trapped in their desire to change the past or control the future. The final tablet they found contained the most important message. Jiwoo read it carefully several times before translating. This one says that time manipulation must never be used for personal gain or power over others. The Sigans learned that changing the timeline creates unpredictable consequences. They call it the temporal cascade, a chain reaction that could destroy the fabric of reality itself. Taeho realized they had found something far more significant than a scientific discovery. They had found wisdom from an ancient civilization that had mastered time manipulation and learned to fear it. But as they prepared to leave the cave, Dongwoo noticed something troubling on his monitoring equipment. "The energy readings are changing," he said. "It's like something else is interfering with the temporal field." Unknown to them, their discovery had not gone unnoticed. Others were already tracking their movements and preparing to claim the ancient power for themselves. The team returned to Seoul the next evening with photographs of the ancient cave crystals and copies of the stone tablet writings. Taeho felt both excited and worried about their discovery. The power they had found was incredible, but the ancient warnings made him nervous. At 7 in the morning, Taeho arrived at the laboratory to find a stranger waiting outside the door. The man wore a black suit and had cold, calculating eyes. He looked like someone who was used to getting what he wanted. "Dr. Kim Taeho," the stranger said in a formal voice. "My name is Nam Seong-ho. I work for a special government division that monitors unusual scientific activities. We need to talk." Taeho felt his heart begin to beat faster. "What kind of government division?" "The kind that does not officially exist," Seong-ho replied. "May I come inside? This conversation should not happen in public." They entered the laboratory, together. Seong-ho looked around at all the equipment with the eyes of someone who understood advanced technology. He stopped in front of the particle accelerator and studied it carefully. "Your experiment 3 days ago created energy signatures that our satellites detected from space," Seong-ho said. "We have been monitoring temporal anomalies for many years. Your discovery is not the first, but it may be the most dangerous." "Dangerous? How?" Taeho asked. "Because you are not the only people trying to manipulate time," Seong-ho explained. "There is an organization called the Eternal Circle. They have been using temporal technology for their own purposes for a very long time. Your experiments have attracted their attention." So-min and Dong-woo arrived at the laboratory and found Taeho talking with the mysterious government agent. Seong-ho introduced himself and repeated his warning about the Eternal Circle. "Who are these people?" So-min asked. "The Eternal Circle believes they can create a perfect world by changing history," Seong-ho replied. "They have been secretly manipulating important events for centuries. Wars that never happened, diseases that were prevented, leaders who died, or lived based on their interference." Dongwoo looked confused. "If they can prevent wars and diseases, why is that bad?" "Because they decide what is perfect," Seong-ho answered. "They eliminate anything or anyone who disagrees with their vision. Entire populations have disappeared from the timeline because the eternal circle decided they were not needed in their perfect world. Seung-ho showed them photographs on his tablet computer. The pictures showed empty cities where millions of people once lived, historical records that had been changed, famous people who had never been born because the eternal circle altered their family histories. The leader of the eternal circle is a woman named Kang Yuri, Seung-ho continued. She has been alive for over 200 years by using time manipulation to prevent her own aging. She is extremely intelligent and completely ruthless. That afternoon, while Tae-ho was alone in the laboratory analyzing the crystal data from Jeju Island, an elegant woman entered without knocking. She had long black hair and looked about 30 years old, but her eyes seemed much older and wiser. "Dr. Kim Tae-ho," she said with a beautiful smile. "I am Kang Yuri. I believe Agent Nam has told you about me." Tae-ho stepped backward, remembering Seung-ho's warnings. "You are the leader of the Eternal Circle." "I prefer to think of myself as a gardener," Yuri replied calmly. "I remove the weeds from the garden of history so that beautiful flowers can grow." She walked over to his computer and looked at the data from their temporal experiments. "You have made an impressive discovery, but you do not understand the true potential of what you have found." Yuri touched the computer screen and somehow activated a program that Tae-ho had never seen before. The screen showed moving images like a movie, but these were scenes from history that looked different from what he remembered. "This is what the world looks like in timeline 347b, Yuri explained. "In this reality, World War II never happened, because I prevented certain key events in 1934. 50 million people who died in our timeline are alive and happy in this one." The images showed peaceful cities, advanced technology, and people living in harmony. It looked like paradise compared to the world Tae-ho knew. "This is timeline 89C, Yuri continued, showing new images. "In this reality, I prevented the spread of several major diseases. Millions of children who died from illness in our timeline grew up to become doctors, teachers, and artists." Tae-ho stared at the screen in amazement. "These other timelines really exist?" "They exist in quantum potential," Yuri answered. "With enough temporal energy, we can make any timeline become the real one. The crystals you found on Jeju Island contain enough power to reshape the last 1,000 years of history." "But the ancient warnings," Tae-ho said. "The Saigons wrote about the temporal cascade. They said changing too much could destroy everything." Yuri laughed softly. "The Saigons were cowards. They had the power to eliminate all suffering from human history, but they were afraid to use it. I am not afraid." She showed him one more timeline on the screen. "This is what I plan to create. No wars, no diseases, no poverty, no crime. Everyone will live in perfect harmony under wise guidance." "Under your guidance," Tae-ho realized. "Someone must make the difficult decisions," Yuri replied. "Someone must decide what is best for humanity. I have lived long enough and seen enough suffering to know what needs to be done." Meanwhile, Dong-woo was in his apartment reviewing the recorded data from their experiments when he noticed something alarming. The temporal field they had created was not completely gone. Small traces of it remained active around their laboratory. He called So-min immediately. "The time distortion is still happening," he told her urgently. "People near our laboratory are experiencing memory glitches. They remember things that never happened." So-min rushed to the university and found several students who seemed confused about recent events. One student insisted that there had been a fire in the library yesterday, but the library was perfectly fine. Another student remembered taking a test that had never been given. "The timeline is becoming unstable," So-min realized. "Our experiment created cracks in reality, and those cracks are spreading." That evening, a young woman appeared at their laboratory door. She looked frightened and exhausted. Her clothes were torn and she had cuts on her hands. "My name is Ominji," she said breathlessly. "I work for the Eternal Circle, but I am trying to escape. Kang Yuri is planning something terrible, and I need your help to stop her." Minji was a quantum engineer who had been forced to work for the Eternal Circle for 3 years. She explained that Yuri had been collecting ancient temporal artifacts from around the world. She has found pieces of Sigan technology in 12 different countries, Minji revealed. Combined with the crystals from Jeju Island, she will have enough power to create a massive temporal field that covers the entire planet. What would that do? Tae-ho asked. It would allow her to rewrite the last 1,000 years of human history all at once, Minji explained. She calls it the Great Correction. Every war, every disease, every event she considers imperfect will be erased and replaced with her version of what should have happened. So-min looked horrified. But the temporal, cascade warning from the ancient texts, if she changes that much history at once, the fabric of reality could collapse, Minji finished. All timelines would merge into chaos. Past, present, and future would become meaningless. Time itself could be destroyed. Dongwoo checked his monitoring equipment and discovered that the temporal distortions around their laboratory had grown stronger. It's getting worse, he reported. People are starting to see multiple versions of themselves from different timelines. Reality is beginning to break down. Yuri does not care about the risks, Minji said. She believes that even if reality collapses, she can rebuild it in her perfect image. She thinks she is saving humanity, but she might destroy everything instead. Tae-ho realized that their simple scientific experiment had unleashed forces beyond their control. The discovery that should have advanced human knowledge had instead attracted the attention of people who wanted to use it for power. We have to stop her, he said firmly. But how do we fight someone who can manipulate time itself? The Saigans found a way, Jiwoo said, as she entered the laboratory with Haijin. They had been researching more ancient texts and had made an important discovery. The final stone tablet in the Jeju cave contained instructions, Jiwoo announced. The Saigans created a way to stabilize time and prevent temporal manipulation from causing a cascade effect, but it requires someone to make a great sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? So-min asked. The instructions are not completely clear, Jiwoo admitted, but it seems that someone must enter the temporal field and become a permanent guardian of the timeline. They would have to give up their normal existence to preserve the stability of time itself. As they discussed the ancient solution, none of them noticed that the temporal distortions around the laboratory were attracting something from across multiple timelines. Different versions of themselves from alternate realities were beginning to appear in their world. The final battle for the nature of time itself was about to begin. The next morning brought chaos to Seoul. People across the city began seeing strange things that should not exist. Cars from different time periods appeared on the same roads. Buildings flickered between old and new versions of themselves. Some citizens saw family members who had died years ago walking the streets. Tae-ho looked out the laboratory window and watched a man arguing with himself. Two identical versions of the same person stood face to face, but one wore modern clothes, while the other dressed like someone from 50 years ago. The timeline barriers are completely breaking down, So-min reported from her computer. Multiple realities are bleeding into our world simultaneously. Dongwoo pointed to his monitoring equipment. The temporal distortions are spreading outward from our laboratory at increasing speed. By tomorrow, the entire country could be affected. Minji studied the data with growing alarm. This is exactly what Kang Yuri wants. The chaos will make people desperate for someone to fix everything. They will welcome her great correction without understanding the true cost. Agent Sung-ho burst through the laboratory door looking exhausted and worried. Yuri has begun moving her equipment to Jeju Island. She plans to activate the temporal nexus tonight during the lunar eclipse. The gravitational alignment will amplify the crystal power by 10,000 times. We have to stop her, Tae-ho declared. How many people are helping her? Too many, Sung-ho replied grimly. The Eternal Circle has members in every government and major corporation around the world. They have been preparing for this moment for decades. Jiwoo spread the ancient Saigon texts across a table. I finished translating the final instructions. The Saigans discovered that time is not meant to be controlled, only guided. They learned to work with the natural flow of temporal energy instead of fighting against it. What does that mean exactly? So-min asked. Think of time like a river, Jiwoo explained. Yuri wants to dam the river and redirect all the water where she thinks it should go. But the Saigans learned to become part of the river itself. They guided the flow gently without trying to control it completely. Heijin pointed to symbols on one of the stone tablets. According to this text, the last Saigan guardian is still alive. He has been protecting the temporal flow for over 800 years by existing partially outside normal time. Where is this guardian? Taeho asked. The text says he reveals himself only when the timeline faces complete destruction, Jiwoo replied. If Yuri succeeds with her plan tonight, he should appear. The team decided to fly to Jeju Island immediately. They needed to reach the cave crystals before Yuri could use them to power her temporal nexus. But as their plane took off from Seoul, strange things began happening aboard the aircraft. Other passengers flickered in and out of existence. Some seats contained people who looked confused and frightened. Others remained empty even though the flight manifest showed them as occupied. The airplane itself seemed to shift between different models and time periods. We are flying through multiple timelines simultaneously, Minji observed. Reality is becoming so unstable that past, present, and future are mixing together randomly. When they landed on Jeju Island, they found the entire area around the ancient caves surrounded by Yuri's people. Black vehicles and high-tech equipment covered the landscape. Enormous cables ran from generators into the cave entrance. She has already connected her temporal nexus to the cave crystals, Seung-ho realized. The power levels must be incredible. They hiked through the forest to reach the caves from a different direction. As they got closer, Taeho felt a strange sensation in his mind. It was like hearing voices from different time periods all speaking at once. Inside the cave, the ancient crystals now blazed with brilliant white light. Yuri stood in the center of a complex machine that hummed with enormous energy. Dozens of technicians operated control panels around the cave walls. "Dr. Kim," Yuri called out when she saw them enter. "You are just in time to witness the birth of a perfect world. You are going to destroy everything," So-min shouted over the noise of the machinery. "The temporal cascade will collapse all of reality." "Reality is already broken," Yuri replied calmly. "Look around you. People are living in fear and confusion. Multiple timelines are creating chaos. I am offering them salvation." She activated a large screen that showed her planned changes to history. Wars disappeared, diseases vanished, natural disasters were prevented. It looked like paradise, but Taeho noticed something troubling. "Where are all the people who disagreed with you?" he asked. "What happened to everyone who wanted to make their own choices?" "They have been edited out," Yuri answered without emotion. "A perfect world has no room for those who would destroy perfection." Suddenly the cave shook with tremendous force. Rocks fell from the ceiling and the crystal light began flickering wildly. An old man appeared in the center of the cave as if materializing from thin air. The man looked ancient but moved with the grace of someone much younger. His eyes seemed to contain the wisdom of centuries. He wore simple robes that seemed to shift between different time periods. "I am Baejin-woo," the old man announced, "the last guardian of the Sagan order. I have protected the timeline for 800 years, and I will not allow you to destroy it now." Yuri laughed. "One old man against my entire organization? You are too late, guardian. The temporal nexus is already activated." Jinwoo raised his hand and suddenly everyone in the cave could see multiple versions of themselves from different timelines. Taeho saw himself as a child, as an old man, and as versions who had made different life choices. "Time is not your enemy," Jinwoo said to Yuri. "You have spent centuries fighting against it instead of learning from it. Time teaches us that change is natural, but wisdom comes from accepting what cannot be controlled." "I refuse to accept a world filled with suffering," Yuri declared. She pushed the final activation button on her machine. The cave exploded with temporal energy. Past, present, and future began colliding in impossible ways. Taeho saw dinosaurs walking through, modern cities, ancient warriors fighting with laser weapons, and people aging and becoming young again in endless cycles. "The temporal cascade has begun," Minji screamed over the chaos. "Reality is collapsing." But Jinwoo remained calm in the center of the storm. "Dr. Kim," he called to Taeho, You discovered time manipulation by accident, but you can also save it. The choice must be made by someone who understands both the power and the responsibility. What do I need to do? Tai-ho asked. Accept that time is both real and illusion, Jinwoo replied. It exists, but our understanding of it is limited. Instead of trying to control time, become part of its natural flow. So-min grabbed Taeho's hand. I understand now, she said with sudden clarity. The coffee cup in our laboratory. It did not go backward because we forced it to. It went backward because the quantum field briefly connected us to the natural temporal flow. Time wants to heal itself, Dongwoo realized. But Yuri's machine is fighting against that natural healing process. Together, the three scientists approached Yuri's temporal nexus. Instead of trying to shut it down, they began adjusting the controls to work with the temporal energy instead of against it. What are you doing? Yuri demanded. You will ruin everything. We are letting time fix itself, Taeho replied. Instead of forcing it to change, we are giving it the freedom to find its own balance. The cave crystals began to pulse with a gentler light. The chaotic temporal energy started to flow in smooth patterns instead of violent explosions. Slowly, the multiple timelines began to separate and stabilize. But Yuri would not give up. She lunged toward the control panel to reverse their changes. In that moment, So-min made a choice that changed everything. She threw herself between Yuri and the controls. The temporal energy flowed through her body as she held the adjustment settings in place. Her sacrifice allowed the natural healing process to complete itself. So-min? Taeho cried out as he watched her begin to fade away. I am not disappearing, So-min said with a peaceful smile. I am becoming part of the temporal flow itself, like Jinwoo did 800 years ago. Someone must guard the timeline to prevent future disasters. The chaotic energy in the cave settled into harmony. The multiple versions of reality separated cleanly, back into their proper timelines. The temporal cascade stopped, and normal time resumed its natural flow. Yuri aged rapidly as the temporal energy that had kept her young for 200 years finally caught up with her. In moments, she crumbled to dust, finally accepting the natural passage of time she had fought against for so long. Time is neither enemy nor servant, Jinwoo said as he began to fade away as well. It simply is. Wisdom comes from living within its flow rather than struggling against it. Taeho found himself back in the laboratory in Seoul 3 days later. The temporal distortions had vanished. People's memories had returned to normal. The coffee cup sat peacefully on its table, no longer defying the laws of physics. Dongwoo looked at their experimental data with new understanding. We learned that time manipulation is possible, but also that it should not be used to control or change reality. Time has its own wisdom. So-min saved us all, Taeho said quietly. She understood that the greatest discovery was not how to manipulate time, but how to live meaningfully within it. He looked at the question written on their whiteboard. Is time just an illusion, really? Now he knew the answer. Time was real in its effects on their lives. It was illusion in the sense that their human understanding of it was limited. But most importantly, time was sacred, because it gave meaning to every moment they experienced. The particle accelerator sat silent and would remain so. Some knowledge was too dangerous to pursue. Some questions were better answered through wisdom than through science. Taeho erased the question from the whiteboard and wrote a new one. How can we live fully within the gift of time we have been given? That was a question worth spending a lifetime trying to answer.